You today. My name is Sarah. I am a cognitive psychologist and global development specialist. And these are some of the clients that I work with. So a lot of the topics that I cover are in difficult contexts, let's say, but I also have quite a few clients based in Europe. I hope I'm not blinding you with this sunlight. Um, Okay, so I just wanted to, a lot of the work that I do ends up, although I'm trained as a behavioral scientist, I would say that it's much more in the social and behavior change space. So I just wanted to start with an introduction of what SBC is, just so we're all sort of on the same page. Um, so essentially, SBC is a form of applied behavioral science. Yeah. So we're trying to use evidence-based and theory-driven approaches to identify which factors would influence behavior and use specific evidence-based techniques to apply, to affect behavior change. An important aspect of SBC is that we're not just looking at individual behavior, but we're also trying to affect social change. So we're looking at change at a societal level. SBC is multidisciplinary, so as you'll see, it does encompass behavioral economics, sociology, social psychology, but also anthropology and marketing. So one of the key features is that we look at everything within a socio-ecological lens. So we're trying to understand what is driving individual behavior given the person's context in their community, in their institutions and policies. And in order for us to do that, we often need to take a participatory and co-creation lens to really get to the bottom of why things are the way that they are. So one of the projects that I want to share with you was on irregular migration. And I think that this is one of those very interesting cases, simply because SBC or a behavioral science lens is rarely used in these contexts. So especially when it comes to topics that are very institution heavy, where there's like a lot of government intervention, there's usually a neglect of the human side or the community side of things. So this project was developed by the Danish Refugee Council, and I was an SBC advisor on this project. And just to like get us all on the same page, when we're talking about irregular migration, we're basically talking about movement that's not through the ordinary channels, right? So a person can be considered an irregular migrant because, their residence permit expired or their current employment expired. So it's a very complex situation. People can also move between the status. So they could come into a place through regular channels, and then their status in the country might change. So when we look at the irregular migration space, it is very top down. There are a lot of like mass campaigns, there's heavy use of murals and social media messaging, mostly from Western countries, talking about the dangers of irregular migration. As some of you might know, a lot of people lose their lives during the journey. And this was one of the first projects to just take a step back and try to understand the behavioral aspects and how we could address communicating around safer migration practices, using a more human lens and a more community-focused lens. So some of the problems with these campaigns is that they're just not responsive to information needs. So I might be looking for a very specific type of support during my journey. Let's say I'm a pregnant woman. I have very specific needs when I'm traveling or migrating, and it might just simply not be possible for me to get that information. So often it's not targeted. A lot of the messaging is not even tested with audiences. We don't know what's working or not working. And then, the needs of migrants might also change along the way. And then there's so many drivers that affect irregular migration as well, that are not targeted in a specific way. So IOM had done some work on a project called Migrants as Messengers, where their innovation was more focused around using an experimental design. So they had an RCT that measured the efficacy of the way that they had designed their campaign as opposed to other campaigns. Now, our approach was completely different because we wanted to work with diaspora organizations. So these are migrants, Afghan migrants in Europe. We focused on 3 European countries. So it was Germany, Denmark, and the Netherlands. And we all know intuitively, you know, and it's just kind of common sense that when somebody wants to leave their country of origin, their first point of contact would be a family or you know, or a family member or a friend who's already in the country that they want to migrate to. But, you know, we needed that data on paper, basically. So this is a survey from an institution called MMC, which surveyed irregular migrants and migrants who were already in the host country about who they go to information. So we already knew that the diaspora was one of the key audiences that people turn to. So it made sense to also partner with diaspora organizations when we're talking about disseminating information around irregular migration. So there are many different types of behaviors that one might want to promote. So we're talking about things like making sure that people carry their ID, for example, with them, because that could greatly facilitate getting them services en route. It's also about them having the correct information sources and then knowing where to get help depending on their needs. So these might seem like, you know, trivial things, but they're actually really key and really important for people to understand before they leave their home country of what's needed. Thank you for that. So we use the P process simply because others were already using it. So we just wanted to keep things aligned. And my work actually covered quite a wide scope within the project. So I supported everything from the way that the research was designed, so also feeding into large-scale surveys, making sure that they're behaviorally informed, to analyzing the data, to then helping the organizations to interpret those findings for themselves. I would say like the biggest luxury of this project was the depth of research and breadth of research that we had. So we had research in Afghanistan, we had research in Europe, and we had research on migrants en route. So we had a lot of great data to work with. And we had the opportunity to feed in some behaviorally informed questions. We wanted to have more sessions in Afghanistan, but the political situation changed. So we weren't able to do things as initially intended, but I think we still got quite far. So of course, we were able to identify several barriers across the individual level, for example. So people had very unrealistic outcome expectations about what life would be like. There are also challenges around family members themselves kind of pressuring people to migrate. So there was definitely a need to have a community level intervention, which we really wanted to have, but we weren't able to because of the political situation. Then there's also just again, you know, this issue of campaigns not being tailored enough. There are also migration resource centers that were not responsive. And there are also political institutional issues around making regular migration routes more accessible. So we made some recommendations around that and you know, how to design interventions that would address policymakers as well. So I think one of the key things that we wanted to get across to the diaspora organizations is to, you know, segment their audiences. So figure out who they wanted to speak to first and foremost, which would make it a lot easier for them to create better campaigns. So in the end, there were 5 different organizations that addressed needs around irregular migration information in completely different ways based on their specific audiences. So for example, we had one organization that just wanted to focus on learning specific phrases in English to facilitate the process. So that was what they found that their audiences really needed. Others focused on the reunification process in Germany. And another organization just focused on the reproductive needs of women traveling irregularly. So that whole process of helping them to sort of figure out what their audiences needed helped them a lot to sort of drill down on what issues they wanted to address. Okay, so I'm just going to whiz through this. Although they really enjoyed the process, they also found it a little bit too technical. They thought that they would have loved to have more time to sort of dig into the different issues. But overall, I think they just felt that it helped them get more focused understanding of the issues and design higher quality interventions. And the independent evaluation also found it quite successful. So I just wanted to just bring this in a little bit because Develina also alluded to it. So there's Arnstein's ladder of participation, and it's very similar to what you showed, Develina. I adapted this to the SBC space because I think that we could all benefit from like questioning what we're doing when we're designing interventions and who we're consulting. So are we at the very low level? Are we just using communities for therapy and manipulation, or are we really looking at partnerships, delegated power, and hopefully citizen control someday? So thank you so much.